Welcome to another episode of Seeing Them Live, a podcast featuring memorable concert stories from live music fans. Everyone has a concert story, and hopefully, one day, we'll hear yours.
I was pretty high, I was sitting outside the dressing room, and I decided I wanted to go. I was getting impatient, and that stuff kind of makes you more aggressive. And I just went into the dressing room because I wanted to get high with Ozzy, and there wasn't anyone around to stop me. And then once I got inside, there was another door back to the right, and I was like, well, that must be where Ozzy is because there's these two ladies over there. And she turns around, sees me, and it's Sharon. So she's like, what are you doing in here? Get out, get out. Started screaming at me. Somehow security barreled in and grabbed me, and they're dragging me out.
Our guest today is Rudy Childs. Rudy is an award-winning documentary filmmaker and producer. His full-length documentaries on heavy metal music have won worldwide acclaim. Rudy is also a rock photographer whose work has appeared in numerous publications. His extensive photography portfolio of seminal bands like Van Halen, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, and Ozzy Osbourne have been incorporated into many coffee table books chronicling their careers. Rudy's latest venture is directing and editing a feature titled The Dogmatics, a documentary, which chronicles the band who helped birth the Boston punk scene in the early 80s. Rudy, welcome to Seeing Them Live.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and we're going to get to rudychilds.com, your website, in a bit, where I encourage everybody to go check out because there's a lot of stuff there. And I'm just trying to get my bearings for this interview, Rudy, based on the stories and such that I read on your website. But I thought kind of how we do with all of our guests, we start with the first concert.
Sure.
Going back to 1976, you were 15 years old.
Yep.
And you saw Aerosmith at the Boston Garden. So what was that like?
Well, it was tough growing up, real strict parents, and then finally getting them to finally allow me to go to my first concert and going with a couple buddies from school. And I guess around that time we were discovering pot. And so it was a big thing to go to a concert and not be under the supervision of your parents or anyone else. And back then they would go into the concert and under the cloak of the darkness, they would light up joints, and we would smoke pot in the concert. So that was a real big thrill for me as a 15-year-old to go there. And one of the things I look back and see that night when I went into the show, I never went to my seat. We kind of heard it around different areas, and we knelt down next to the railing and watched. It was Rick Derringer first and then Aerosmith afterwards. But that kind of set a trend that I would keep for a long time. I unless I had a substantially good seat, once I was in the arena, it was just try to drive towards the front and get as close as possible. I didn't get very close that night, but it was just an enchanting evening. Aerosmith was kind of finishing off their Rocks tour, but the band was kind of getting into drugs at that point. So Tyler's voice wasn't as great back then as, when we listened to those first four albums, it was like, you wanted to hear like the album. And when I went and saw them live, it wasn't the same effect.
I first saw Aerosmith, I've mentioned this before, in 1978 at Comiskey Park, the old Comiskey Park where the Chicago White Sox used to play. I was really looking forward to seeing Aerosmith, and it was so terrible. It was still to this day probably the worst concert I've ever been to. I couldn't even understand what songs they were playing till about the eighth song when they played Sweet Emotion, and I kind of could recognize it, I don't know if it was a sound thing. I don't know if it was a drug thing, but man, it was super bad. So when you mentioned that, it made me think of that concert and my experience.
I've seen them other times, and they've been good. They've been really good. But there was a time period, and I believe that they were using a lot of coke back then. It would affect the nasal drip into his throat, and his singing wasn't that well.
Yeah.
So at least that's because he'd disappear off stage and we're all going, he's back there doing lines, later down the line at 15 years old, I didn't understand why it didn't sound the way it should have, but
that's a good observation because I was probably at that time 13 or 14. And yeah, like you were saying, you just want it to sound like it sounds like on the radio or the album. And
Right.
I couldn't, it was so weird. I couldn't believe how terrible it sounded. But
Yep.
anyway, you answered the question, your most surprising, and I didn't see this on your website, which again, we'll get to in just a second. When you were at a Van Halen concert with your friend,
Yeah.
were you still in high school then, Rudy?
No. That was like in 1983, I believe, the Diver Down tour.
Okay.
My friend Walt, he just mounted up and had to start the gigging with the band. And he just, next thing you know, he was just climbed over the barrier and he hit the stage. And I took my camera out and I snapped the picture before he actually made it into the spotlight. You could see the silhouette of him. But once he got to the microphone and just the way he went. So my buddy Walt, he just, sometimes you just, the feeling gets upon him so hard that he just has to get the gigging and mounts up there with the band.
That was during, you said Ice Cream Man?
Yeah, it was a good time. Actually, it's the anniversary of it. Back in 1978, this date, September 4th, I went and saw Van Halen for the first time. And that was probably one of the most mind-blowing experiences I ever had because when I was standing in line at the Cape Cod Coliseum, general admission, I didn't know who the opener was for Black Sabbath. And someone said, it's Van Halen. And I'm like, you mean like Van Morrison? I didn't. And they go, no, they do the Kinks song, You Really Got Me. And I think, oh yeah, I've heard that on the radio. So we went in there and Van Halen, literally, 23 years old, these guys were, just exploded on stage and just demolished Black Sabbath. It was really on a downslide at that point because they were only months away from getting rid of Ozzy, I think, by October. So yeah, it was like I saw him in September, October, he was gone. And, I read up on that. His vocals were affected by a lot of drug use and his whole performance was, and it just didn't, it wasn't, a powerful concert for them. But Van Halen, on the other hand, just took to the stage. And I mean, seeing Eruption for the first time and the way his fingers webbed apart doing that solo, not having the album yet. And there I was, I had an Instamatic camera with flash cubes and 12 pictures. And I waited, you would wait for the best picture. And then next thing you know, I have Eddie Van Halen doing Eruption in front of me and I'm snapping this picture. And it's just, yeah, I can't, it's what a thrill. And then you look back at it now and even seeing him in 84, 83, 82, all those years too, then 88, great shows. And Eddie Van Halen was like one of the best guitar players that I was lucky alive to see.
Yeah. And you mentioned this camera, your first camera you bought at a yard sale, right?
Yeah. Well, it started with the Instamatic camera that was my parents' with the flash cube. And then I went to a yard sale and there was a 35 millimeter camera and, they had a price on it for $15. And I didn't, you're a young kid, you don't have money. I was probably like at this point 18 or 19, and I know it wasn't the honest thing to do, but the price was written in like a grease pencil, and like when I pushed my thumb on it, it just erased the one. And so I had a camera for $5. So he sold me my camera for $5.
Okay, because you use the camera then, or you would sneak cameras into shows, right, and make your way up front,
right? Because then after the Boston Garden experience, Aerosmith and all that, I think I went to a couple more Boston Garden shows, Alice Cooper, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, all phenomenal shows. But I found the Cape Cod Coliseum, which was general admission, and I'm a big guy. So when I took my camera to the first concert there, was Blue Oyster Cult, and I pushed my way to the front, and I got like 4 rows back. But all these arms were kind of in my way with people, just in the crowd. And so then I figured out the next show I got all the way to the front, right to the barrier. I was going to be that guy, and I'd wait there with my camera, just waiting for that one moment that they came in front of me on the stage, and then I would take the picture, because you were very limited how many rolls of film you could sneak in and stuff with the flash cubes.
Yeah, I mean, everybody takes it for granted now with your phone, but I remember even myself, I'm not a professional photographer or anything, but I would occasionally take taking a camera with me, and I'd have, somebody bring the film.
Yeah.
Somebody takes the body, and I take the lens, and then you reassemble it when you get back into the show. And I took some interesting pictures of David Bowie's band, Tin Machine.
No kidding. Wow.
A short-lived experiment he had at the Riviera nightclub in Chicago. And I snuck in its camera, and I was shooting this really fast, I guess it's fast film.
Oh, yeah.
Like dark locations. It was like 3,200 film speed or something. And so they're kind of grainy, but it kind of adds to the mystery of it all. And man, if you got caught, which I never did, you could get, thrown out of the concert or the camera taken away, or both.
Well, the other thing was, Charles, and you can agree on this, is that you couldn't take a flash in with either because you couldn't get caught. So you had to take the pictures with available lighting, and that was a tough thing to do because the colored lighting isn't like a stage show you see nowadays where there's a million lights just and background screens and stuff like that. When you went to a concert, there was a lighting rig, and it sat up in the ceiling, and the red lights were red and the blue lights are blue, and they just kind of switched them back and forth. If they didn't have any front spotlights, that made it difficult to shoot. So, but I had set out on a mission after that 78 summer where I went to the Cape Cod Coliseum every weekend to see Van Halen, Black Sabbath, The Outlaws, Thin Lizzy, Foreigner, Michael Stanley Band, Nantucket, Ted Nugent, Jay Giles, Tom Petty, Blue Oyster Cult, Cheap Trick. I saw all these concerts. Every weekend there was a different one with a great opener. And then I was taking pictures at them all because I'd bring them back. My friends, everyone was blown away by these pictures. So it started me on a mission. And I went for quite some years just that's all I wanted to do was take pictures of concerts. So I wanted to be a rock concert photographer and get published, but I'll be honest, drugs got in the way.
Yeah, you mentioned that on your website, and it's part of I guess it's all chronicled in your untitled book, or the working title of your book is Riff Raff and Rock and Roll. And so you talk about these interesting stories, just a few highlights from the book. And you do talk about your struggle with drugs and such. So again, I encourage people to check out these stories, but a few that stood out to me, and I'm not going to go in any particular order. You had a run-in with Sharon Osbourne. Was it Ozzy Osbourne concert or a Black Sabbath concert? Or
it was an Ozzy concert. It was 82, and it was the Merriweather. By this time, 78, I start taking pictures. By about 82, I start figuring out that I could get passes somehow. And part of how we got the passes was we would go to the hotel and meet the band, and we'd meet Ted Nugent and stuff like that, get his autograph. And, I had a friend that was a flim flam artist, and he was kind of like, oh, can you get me passes? He'd ask people and stuff, but we weren't girls, so we weren't going to get passes unless we had drugs. So we ended up kind of weaseling our way into a few situations with drugs. For the most part, we relied on this one guy. He ended up getting us passes to this Ozzy concert. I've been sober for like 37 years now, but back then I was not sober, and we'd smoked some angel dust, and I was pretty high, and I was sitting outside the dressing room, and I decided I wanted to go. I was getting impatient, and that stuff kind of makes you more aggressive. And I just went into the dressing room because I wanted to get high with Ozzy. And there wasn't anyone around to stop me. And then once I got inside, there was another door back to the right. And I was like, well, that must be where Ozzy is, because there's these two ladies over there. And she turns around, sees me, and it's Sharon. So she's like, what are you doing in here? Get out, get out. Started screaming at me. Somehow security barreled in and grabbed me, and they're dragging me out.
Did you ever meet Ozzy? Or?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, Ozzy was really cool. I met him finally. We were trying to find, in 84, I was trying to find Motley Crue or something in one of the hotels in the Four Seasons. And he came out, and he had this big old fur coat on and stuff. All the times I've met him, like at an album signing, he was always kind of just quiet and just observed and noticed. But one time we talked to him, and I said something about having pictures of the Randy Rhoads show back in 81 in Towson, Maryland. And he was, oh my God, it kind of got his attention. But for the most part, those guys I see a lot of the artists, when you talk to them, they just seem like they hear so many stories from people and, they just kind of try to just listen. It's really hard to get them to engage. There are some that I've had good relationships with over the years, though, and reached that point where you can have a dialogue with them. But a lot of rock stars, when they're in that certain mode, they're just doing their job. So it's kind of hard to catch them, and you got to catch them at a restaurant or something like that.
Then you had this other story where you impersonated a magazine writer for Kerrang. Is that how you say that?
Yeah, that's a very famous heavy metal British star, London magazine. What happened is I went to the US Festival, and we were only there to go see Heavy Metal Day. The first day, I think it was like Men at Work, Flock of Seagulls, Stray Cats, things like that. We weren't really into it, so we were just hanging out. And we went up to the riding the buses around trying to stay out of the heat. But we went up to the front gate and found there was a press tent over nearby. So we walked over to the press tent, and I knew how to flim flam. So I was with my buddy John Dix, and I looked at him. I said, we said, yeah, we're here to pick up our passes. And they handed us the clipboard and said, well, what's your name? And so right away we were with Kerrang, So in we went, and once we were inside, we had these laminated passes. We went back to Press Island and, up to the beer garden. We found our friends and stuff. But the second day was the Scorpions were playing Heavy Metal Day. And I had signed up a list that said I wanted to interview the band. All the bands were not congregating on Press Island. It was all the press people there, and it was very limited access. And then I went out to take pictures of Motley Crue and Quiet Riot and all that. And then next thing you know, they're looking for me to do this interview. And I come back to Press Island, my friend John, they're looking for you. Because communication was different back then. There wasn't a cell phone. You were there or you weren't. And there was a huge crowd there that day at the US Festival. So they put me in a cart, drove me over to where the band was waiting to do this interview. When they got there, they weren't there or something like that. And then they ended up changing locations. We went to the other location. By that time, they'd flown away. But in the meantime, I'm like, how am I going to interview these guys? I don't know nothing about an interview. It wasn't going to work for me, but I was making up questions. What am I going to ask them? I don't have a tape recorder. I was kind of fumbling and nervous about the whole thing. I was trying to convince them I really want to take some pictures. Just let me go up to the stage, and they wouldn't limited access. It wouldn't let me up there or whatever. But yeah, that was one of the ones I would love to have pulled that off if I could have, but I didn't get the interview.
So close, but yet so far, right?
I got some great pictures from the US Festival.
And then you had mentioned too, during a Bob Seger concert, you were backstage, and I was wondering how did you get backstage? And I think you had one of Bob's beers while he was out there performing.
So what happened is we would go to the Merriweather, and I guess this is around 82. This is when we started realizing how to flim flam. I think it was the same year we saw Ozzy there and Tom Petty. And what happened was someone got us tickets or passes, and they were going to be at the window for us, this guy that we'd met backstage or at the hotel. So we went there, and my friend went to go pick up the passes. And when he did, they were thumbing through the envelopes, and he was looking over their shoulder or kind of like at an angle, and he spotted a name. And he came back to me, and he goes, "Go ask for Charles Zona's pass." And I'm like, okay. So I just wandered on up there, and I said, give me your passes. And they said, well, you got your ID? No, I left it in the car. I says, well, can I sign for it? And they said, sure, here. So I'd sign your name, and away I'd walk with another set of passes. And we figured out this riffraff thing going on. And so we've gotten into Bob Seger riffraffing, going up there with fake names. And I've had we've sent people in line to go get a name, and then all of a sudden the guy goes, "Hey, wait a minute, that's me." And he's like right behind him, and my friend would just run away. So we were riffraffing passes, and we got backstage at Bob Seger. And when I was standing on stage taking some pictures, and next thing you know, I see my friend, he's trying to take some pictures too, and he trips over something, and he unplugs Bob Seger's guitar. And the next thing, the security are chasing him, and he's gone. So I just go back to the dressing room, and since Bob's on stage, nobody's guarding the beer. So I had my backpack that I would carry around with all my photos in it. And I started just, now I'm carrying my photo books under my arm, and my whole backpack's full of all Bob Seger's beers. We were very bad, drugs, alcohol, you mix it all up, a little bit of rock and roll, you get riffraff.
Tripping over a guitar chord here and there, and you're busted, right?
Yep.
All right, Rudy, we could move into, you've made 4 documentaries, right?
6, I believe.
6? Okay.
There's Heavy Metal Picnic, and then Tension, 25 Years Underground, 1984 Ride into Hell, 1985 Indestructible, and then the Dogmatics, the current one. And then I did one on the Soldier just to prove that I could do something outside my wheelhouse.
Yeah, that one's called 21 Years, A Folded Flag.
Yeah. And currently I work with a lot of bands, and I do music videos for them and stuff like that. There's a couple of heavy metal bands that I'm working with right now.
Now, on some of the titles, Rudy, like Riding into Hell, 1984, is that just the year of the entire documentary, highlights that particular year?
And it's a very, very interesting year in the news, like Elton John getting married to a woman, Madonna doing the MTV Music Awards, the Mac computer being introduced. There's all the stuff that I've kind of put together as like a news sort of reel of the year in different parts to carry the story along. But the other story that's weaved in there at the time, I had a video camera. I was recording this stuff. I was managing a heavy metal band called Forcer. And I was trying to get them a record label and stuff like that. Actually, I got them a contract, but they didn't sign it. So that's why you don't know who they are anymore. But it's a great story. I mean, it's very entertaining. It's again, mixed drugs and alcohol and a young guy with a video camera, and you get some riffraff. So we would do some stupid stuff. And then eventually what happened I do a follow-up to this 1985 Riding in Indestructible is the follow-up to it. The band gets another singer. We try to go to Hollywood and make it during the hair metal days in Hollywood on the Strip there. At this point, we ended up with a microphone to go along with our camera, a CBS microphone. So we were running around with the camera, pretending like we were the news, and we would get into all kinds of crazy places,
Yeah, I saw that on that Heavy Metal Picnic. Someone was holding a microphone that had the ABC or CBS.
CBS. And then the quick story behind that was in 1985, Reagan was getting inaugurated in January, and my friend Curtis was the security guard watching CBS's equipment. So needless to say, we came out with hats and luggage tags and IDs and, microphone clips. And so we were masquerading around at different events as like we were the news. So they're kind of fun videos to watch just to see what the young mind will produce.
I think I watched a trailer of, I don't know if it was a trailer, it kind of looked like one of Tension. So that was the name of the band, right?
Yeah, Tension was a band out of Maryland. And they were actually Marty Friedman's first band. He was like 14 years old. And Marty Friedman, of course, went on to 10 years through the 90s with Megadeth. Great guy. And I just had all this footage of these guys. And I'm like, let's do it. So we tell the story of Deuce, inception, all the way to where they released their first album as Tension. And, they're still good friends of mine. Yeah, but it's like they wouldn't bow down to the record company who wanted to become more commercial and do more radio-oriented songs. They just wanted to do the complex metal sort of thing and speed it up. And as things were going that way too. So at that time period, Tension with Marty Friedman, and then it ended up once Marty left and went on to do Hawaii and Cacophony, and then eventually Megadeth. They brought in Timmy Meadows. Now, these guys, I would have loved to have been the manager of them, but at the time I was still in my addiction, and they knew it. I was in a fog. If I had not immersed myself into that angel dust and cocaine, I would have it'd be a different story. But as it goes, 30 some odd years later, now I've got all these photos and all this video, and I'm like, well, let's make it sing and dance. So I've been releasing it, and it's been coming out. It's just Capitol Center book. They featured like 9 pages of my stuff in there. And that was a place that I used to get thrown out on at a regular basis. I mean, I got some pretty vicious stories about fighting and stuff like that with security guards as they're trying to take me away.
Well, in that particular documentary in 2012, you won Best Feature Film Documentary, right?
Yes. Somewhere up here on my mantle, I've got a whole bunch of awards we've done. I've done really well with them. I mean, it's one of those things where it really starts with the original footage. And I was just very fortunate that somewhere in me was driving me to photograph and videotape everything. And there I was videotaping it and, you know, not knowing what I'd ever do with it. I didn't have any idea of even how to white balance a camera correctly, but I eventually learned. And then I started, you know, the digital age came. I was able to preserve all my 90% of my collection of photography and start digitizing. And then people started this, like Martin discovered it. He was like, he found me on a website and he was like, you saw my Thin Lizzy pictures. You know, where'd you get these? I'm like, I got a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm like, and they're not published? And I'm like, nope. They're just sitting around waiting to be published. So yeah, I'm very excited about that. Yesterday, I just found out that I got the cover of a Blue Oyster Cult book by Martin called A Visual Biography. So I'm very excited. He's got it in the mail to me now. So
yeah, because on your website, you mentioned, and I think I mentioned in the introduction, that your images are in a number of coffee table books, and I would imagine also like rock and roll books, biographies, and things like that.
Yeah, we're getting there. It's like I've got this certain era of stuff, you know, like the Ozzy book. I took shots of him at different concerts when he was with Black Sabbath, and then I saw him like when he recorded the album Speak of the Devil. I was so into this that I worked for Amtrak during the day, but I would get on a train and ride up to New York from Washington, D.C., where I was living, and I would go to concerts and then sit up there all night till 3 a.m. and take the train back and go to work. And I did that with Pink Floyd The Wall, with Ozzy, with Motley Crue. Eventually, I wasn't really welcome at the Capitol Center in Maryland because I'd raised such a ruckus between smoking my PCP, angel dust and all that, and fighting with the bouncers that I actually had to go see shows in Philadelphia. And then my family lived in Massachusetts, so I would come all the way up as far as New England and see shows up here too. So I was constantly just going to shows anywhere I could, even Indiana. I was so into it. Yeah,
because you say, I think on your website, that your grandfather got you a job at Amtrak?
Yep, I got a job at Amtrak in 1979, and I just finished off a 42-year career with them. You know, there was a couple of years in there where things were really sketchy for me because of my drug use. And I eventually, in 1987, went and sobered up and got my act together. And then went on to like do video production for Amtrak and made safety videos and stuff like that. I really, once I got clean, I just really, let me figure something out. And I got my head together, wrapped around video production. And then eventually it was like looking at all these old videotapes. Either they're going to throw them in a dumpster one day or I'm going to do something with them now. So that's what I decided to do. And so each project that I've worked on has just had a plethora of old video that you just got to, I kind of made it sing and dance a little bit, you know, it's just good stuff. Oh, Ben, you can't go back in time and film it. That's the thing.
Right. No, you've got it. You just got to, put it together. But so I would imagine you get to travel for free then as an Amtrak employee.
Oh, yeah.
So that must have factored into this Pink Floyd show, because they only played like what, in New York and Los Angeles, was it?
Yes. And then in London.
Okay. Because, I was bummed out that they skipped Chicago, you know, of course, I really wanted to see that.
I went up the first night and I went up the day before the show. And then I ended up, back then you start partying with some people and next thing you know, we're in a hotel room and they let me crash on the floor. And the next morning I got up and it was just trying to find a ticket. You know, that's all I wanted to do is get a ticket to get in the door. And I had $60 on me. And, you know, I don't even know what I ate. I don't even think I ate back then. I wouldn't go buy beer or nothing like that. I would just My focus was I had film, I had my camera, I need to get in the show. And so finally I was like, had a sign and everybody was looking for tickets and they were lined up down the street in front of me by now. And I'd been out there for hours and I was just catching some guys making a left-hand turn. And the guy spotted me. He's like, oh, ticket, and I'm thinking, oh, here we go. No, I need a ticket, He goes, no, I got one. I'm like, really? He goes, how much will you give me for it? I said, $60. He goes, I don't know. I said, come on. A little tug of war, boom, I got the ticket, And then the crowd you mobbed them afterwards. Like everyone wants that ticket. And the guy just realized at that point that he just gave away the golden egg. But anyways, I was just about to go into the concert, threw my sign away. And then a couple of friends came down from Boston. I didn't know they were going to be there. And they showed up. And next thing you know, we need tickets too. And I'm like, oh, so we bought tickets in the parking lot for Wednesday night for them. And they were going to just go home and come back. Well, I said, well, let's just all sneak in with the tickets. So we get to the door and we hide all the camera and film and all that. And we I go in first, he carries my ticket, I get through. The guy behind me, same thing. And then all of a sudden, the third guy we were with, he looks at the ticket and he's going, this is the wrong night. So he hands the ticket back to him. And I'm telling my friend on the other side of the turnstile, go to the other usher, go to the other line, get in the other line. So he goes over and he finally gets up there and he gets in. And we all kind of cluster and get down to the floor. And what a magnificent show to see the original wall with, at the time, state-of-the-art art, but, see what Roger Waters did with it later. It was so archaic. They had to build these big, huge refrigerator-sized bricks and then try to make them lightweight. And it was just incredible. And the inflatables that came up and we were so into the album itself. And then I remember someone after the concert told me there's a secret message on the wall. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. No, you got to listen to Empty Spaces. They play it backwards, So here I am when I finally get home. I'm spinning the album backwards, trying to figure out what the secret message is and all that. It's good times, man. It was just, And I did. Took the train back that morning. I remember staying up like all night and then just rolling into Washington, D.C. And here I am at work,
Where was the show, Rudy?
Nassau Coliseum.
Nassau Coliseum.
Yeah, so I had to take I think Long Island Railroad or something out there at the time. I think that arena's gone now. I've seen a couple other shows there. Saw Paul McCartney years later. And I remember seeing, they got all these banners in there now. Back in the 80s, I don't think they had them because the hockey team was so successful.
So has anybody used those Pink Floyd images anywhere?
They didn't survive as well as I'd hoped. Because a lot of times, the negative, the chemical makeup and stuff like that, they faded really bad. By the time I digitized them, it was a little disappointing. I had a house fire in 2007 and I lost a lot too. But I do have proof that I was there, but I don't have quality pictures. It just wasn't real. Some nights I'd get too high. I'll be honest with you. And we were getting high at that one.
Yeah, that medium film, I know can be very finicky when you develop it, archive it. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't age.
No, it turns red sometimes. I don't know if it's the original film that you bought that wasn't a good purchase or whether it was the chemical. And then I had problems with people stealing my photos at the developing lab. They all of a sudden they have a whole bunch of bluish or gold pictures and I went to a party one time. The dude had him hanging on his wall. And I'm looking at them pictures. And I'm like, one of my rolls of film was missing from that night when we developed it. And I'm looking at the picture. I said, whoever took these pictures was right next to me. And the guy starts telling me the story about how he stole them because he works at the photo lab. And I looked over at the dude. I was going to kill him. He's like, and he went quickly into his bedroom because I kind of met him through a friend. And he went back there and got the negatives real quick.
What are the odds of that, right?
Yeah, I hear you. But that's where a lot of the photos would be sent to. And it was real close to where we lived. So it wasn't a surprise that someone lived in that area that stole them.
The movies are available on your website. They look like around $15, maybe. Is that correct?
Yeah, hard copies. I got hard copies available. They're DVDs, but they're also available on, there's a thing called Thunderflix. And what it is it's a Netflix for heavy metal.
Oh, okay.
I think you pay $6.66 a month and you can see Scorpions, Ozzy, and Megadeth, Metallica, and all these great Alice Cooper, and my movies are all mixed in there with them too. So yeah, we're real happy about that. I got some sort of distribution. It doesn't pay, it doesn't pay the bills, but it it's nice to have a little bit of something for my efforts. We're really hoping that the book takes off, because the book that, I've had a very candid conversation with you about things, and I really get into detail from a fan's perspective of what went on. And I've read a lot. I had to read a lot of books to compare mine as I did a book proposal, but you can read a book and you can almost tell when they're holding back. And it's a little embarrassing for me sometimes to talk so candidly about like the drug use and stuff like that. But I would document stuff. I was on some sort of mission. I would write things down. I would take pictures. I would sneak tape recorders into concerts. I would videotape what I could, and I just kept answering machine tapes. And I thought about it, and back in the time, if the district attorney ever found me, he'd go, "Thank you, Mr. Childs. You just made our job a lot easier." So I took all that information and translated it to the story. And then we worked with a media consultant and paid a very handsome price to help us polish the book. But the thing is, books are not getting published like they are back in the day. And I'm not a famous person. So we're still working the rounds of trying to get it out there. But we've had to get it down from 144,000 words into under 100,000. And the whole book, it's very detailed in what a young guy will do to fulfill this mission that I was on, and how I recovered through my addiction, how it blocked me from my path, relationships. It's got good story arcs. It's not just a bunch of crazy tales. That's what I had at first,
Yeah, well, having all that documentation really helps when you go look back at things. And like you were saying, reading books and probably fan websites and stuff like that to fill in the details. But that's quite an accomplishment. So congratulations on that. It's hard to write a book.
It is very hard. It's taken years.
But as of right now, it's not published. You're still kind of shopping it around.
We're still shopping it around, but, stay in touch with rudychilds.com. And I've constantly got new stuff coming up, either a new music video by some of the bands up here in the Boston area I work with. Some of them are garage bands. Some of them are heavy metal bands. I have books or pictures getting published. I got something really big happening, and I'm not even allowed to. I had to sign a court document or a lawyer's thing to say I can't reveal any of it. And I hate to tease you with that, but something very big's happening down the line. Not with the book, but some other band that's really a big name band. So
awesome. That's great. Well, once the legal stuff gets cleared up, maybe you come back on and talk about it.
Oh, I'd love to. First at the seams, I don't know what to do about it, but they really liked my footage and they liked what I had to say. So
awesome. That's really cool.
I've always got something going like this. I'm actually retired from Amtrak for like 4 years now. So I focus a lot on my last year was doing the documentary with the Dogmatics. They're just a fun band. As a matter of fact, the band Forcer in my 1984 video was offered a deal from Homestead Records, Dutch East Indies, and they didn't accept the deal. But my friends up here in Boston, the Dogmatics, did. And they've got a couple albums out. And so they've got a legacy, and they're very popular in this Northeast area. And they've done well with XM radio and stuff like that. And so they're currently doing new stuff, and that's being received well. So I'm tagging along with this band, and now we released their video of the documentary. We won the LA Punk and Film Festival back in December. We won up in New Hampshire, Best of Show at the Manchester International Film Festival in New Hampshire. I'm kind of looking on my wall there, and yeah, we won at the World Music and Independent Film Festival for Best Documentary. So we have a bunch of victories with that, and I'm currently talking with another distributor because I don't know if it's the right fit for Thunderflix. I could put it on there, but I'm looking at another distributor for that one.
Okay.
It's the trick is just to try to get the stuff out there. It's different from how I grew up and how it was done in the old days. It's different now. So
So now when I was on your website, Rudy, it looks like I could sign up or leave my email. And then what is that, like a newsletter or what?
I got to get more busier. What I'm going to actually start a blog. I do a blog, but a podcast. I'm going to try to get some of the stories out there just to kind of get an audience.
Because you have a blog. I think you call it a blog, right?
Yeah, I got to get more active with it. I get so busy with so many other projects, production. I didn't even tell you that after I got sober, I went and took video production classes at a night school while I was still working with Amtrak, and I learned how to do this stuff. And then I started a boxing show. And we started a boxing show in 91, I did, and on public access, and it went for 5 years, and it won a whole bunch of awards because I was really good at it. And then I moved up onto regional sports networks, and then I was on Home Team Sports, and then Fox Sports Detroit, Sacramento. I did distribution. We were in 133 million homes with this boxing show, and I'd still go to concerts, but there I was doing video production. And in the end, I ended up going to China multiple times to produce over there and bring back the product and distribute in the United States. And that was before COVID was the last time I did a boxing show. But I was the actual producer. I would go in there on a truck. And I mean, this is the same guy that was all spaced out on green. And there I was, producing boxing programming. And so, I had that experience that I'd done for almost 30 years. As I was still working with the railroad, I was still running around doing all this other stuff and going to concerts still and snapping a few pictures. So I'm still on that mission, I guess. It just hasn't quit me yet.
Yeah, it sounds like you're keeping busy.
Yes.
Rudy, as we come up on time here, is there anything you'd like to plug or talk about? I mean, we talked about a ton. And again, I encourage people to go to your website because I'm sure I missed a few things.
Yeah, the media page, and I've tried to figure it out. I have got so much stuff that I've been involved with, whether it's rock and roll or boxing. I mean, like YouTube and trying to get music videos out there. And it turns out like one of my most popular music video is from the Shining Star Baptist Church. I did a Ride Out Your Storm. It's like 5 million hits or something. And I was afraid to put my name as the producer on it because the guy I was working with wanted to plagiarize something and use like something out of the movie Platoon. And I'm like, I'm not going to get, dragged into court for that. So I put myself as the editor, but that thing's done spectacularly well over the years. But my heavy metal, it's still there. I got links to a lot of my music videos, the trailers. There's actually links to the actual documentaries that can go on Vimeo. I feel it's more important for the people to see it than it is for me to get paid. That's kind of how I feel about it. I mean, I just needed to catch fire. I throw so many things at the wall. I'm just waiting for that one thing to stick,
Yeah, for sure. You got a lot of material out there.
I'm on a mission.
I only scratched the surface, but it's really interesting. And your writing is very candid, as you said. So yeah, I'd encourage everyone to go to rudychilds.com. That's pretty much where you could find everything, Rudy.
Yeah. And then, like I said, the media page is just so much stuff on there. You could spend a lot of time on there just grazing through it. So time for a quick story?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Go for it.
I'm at this concert in 1990. I'm with my friend Mike Kovar, and I go to see Joe Walsh. He's playing at Hammerjacks. And we're there in about, 5 or 6 rows back. And I decided I wanted to hear a song off the So What album, which was All Night Laundromat Blues, which is just some stupid little studio song he did to fill in the little gap on the album. And so I'm yelling in my loud voice, All Night Laundromat Blues. So I keep screaming it every time between songs. Finally, Joe Walsh has had enough. He looks over at me, would you shut up? I'm going to play it. Just shut up. So he gets up to the microphone. He does it. He looks down at me. He goes, are you happy now? Will you shut up now?
Okay.
I'm good, Joe. So the rest of the concert, good time, a little embarrassing. But years later, my friend Kovar goes to see Joe Walsh, and it's he's doing a residency in Vegas. And he was in second row because he's a big Joe Walsh fan. And he sits down in the second row, and Joe Walsh has his back to him. He's doing something with his guitar. And my buddy just couldn't help himself. He yells out, All all night long blues. And Joe Walsh just turned around as quick as possible with those peering eyes. And he was just like, who said that? Where is that bastard? I want to kill him. So I think I left an impression on Joe.
Man, yeah, that's a pretty funny story. And people might follow your lead on that one for Joe Walsh concert.
Poor Joe Walsh. He'll never hear the end of it now.
Well, Rudy, yeah, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate you spending time seeing them live and chatting about your rock and roll stories, concert stories. When other things develop, we'll stay in touch and maybe we'll do an update for everyone to hear what you've been up to.
Excellent. I appreciate it, Charles.
That's a wrap for our show. I want to thank today's guests for sharing their concert stories with us. Make sure to check out our show notes at seeingthemlive.com for links to websites, photos, and other artifacts mentioned in the show. I also want to thank my producer, Doug Florzak. The theme music for the show was composed by Doug and is featured on his album, Flagstone. If you have a concert story you'd like to share on our podcast, please visit our website and click on Become a Guest in the main menu. Then fill out the form and click the Submit button. If you seem like a good fit for the show, we'll contact you via email. I guess it's time to head for the exits. We'll see you next time on Seeing Them Live.